West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
But we begin tonight with what America means for people. The symbols we latch onto, our flag, the bald eagle, even good old apple pie. These things matter to people. But there is a new symbol taking over America. It is much more sinister, but just as sacred. And that is the AR-15. Republicans like to say their beloved AR-15 is not a weapon of war. But it absolutely is. It was designed as a soldier's rifle in the late 1950s and soon became standard issue for U.S. troops in Vietnam. The Washington Post lays out this history in its piece on how the AR-15 became a powerful political, cultural symbol in America. It was invented by Eugene Stoner, a World War II veteran who died in 1997. C. Reed Knight, who owns a Florida gun-making company and considers Stoner his mentor, told the Post that Stoner had no interest in civilians using his invention and that he would have been horrified by the idea that he invented the tool of all this carnage in the schools. Despite its origin story, the AR-15 is now an American icon that has little to do with conflicts overseas. Instead, it has become the emblem of a gun-worshiping society. That transformation wasn't immediate. In fact, the weapon used to be a taboo, an outsider gun stashed away at gun shows. Gun manufacturers never imagined civilians would need or even want a lethal military-style rifle. That started to change in 2004 when the AR-15 re-entered the gun market after the end of the federal assault weapons ban. And then, as the Washington Post points out, it boomed after 9/11 and during the wars that followed. Gunmakers pounced on the opportunity, making this weapon of war look cool and sexy, and playing off the country's heightened interest in the military at that time. Doug Painter, a former president of a firearms industry lobbying group, told the Post, "There has never been a better accidental advertising campaign in history." For many other reasons, including fear of another weapons ban and fear of a Democratic black president, the AR-15 was completely rebranded as a consumer weapon. The money poured in, the U.S. pumping them out by the millions. Big money, blood money, and a marketing campaign. It is as American as apple pie. This firearm, as we know, is also a killing machine. It is the weapon of choice for mass shooters. And once again, following yet another massacre, leaving dead children and mourning families in its wake, the gridlock over guns has returned to Washington. House Democrats held a press conference calling for action on gun violence. Congresswoman Veronica Escobar of Texas was there. Her district includes El Paso, where in 2019, a man killed 23 people with an AK-47 in a racist attack at a Walmart. This was her message today to her Republican colleagues.
We have to fix it. It is our job to fix it. It is our obligation to fix it. If not now, when? And to my Republican colleagues who refuse to act, if you don't want to get to work, get out of the way so that the rest of us can.
The remarks encapsulate the very moment that we are in right now. The rage, frustration, and grief over American carnage. But it also reveals what we're up against, because Republicans are not going to get out of the way, meaning gun reform technically can't happen. And it's not because the will isn't there for most Americans. Remember, the polling is clear. Americans want gun reform. 63% of Americans are dissatisfied with U.S. gun laws. In another poll, 70% of Americans prioritize laws reducing gun violence over ownership rights, meaning the Democratic Party is on the side of 70% of the American people. But that other 30%, they're going to get their way, because we are a country that is ruled by a small extremist minority. So it doesn't matter that children are massacred. 20 babies in Sandy Hook, 19 babies in Uvalde, the vigils and the marches, the pleas and parents who will never be the same. None of it is likely to result in legislative action, wrote Ronald Brownstein of The Atlantic, because gun control is one of many issues in which majority opinion in the nation runs into the brick wall of a Senate rule, the filibuster, that provides a veto over national policy to a minority of the states, most of them small, largely rural, preponderantly white, and dominated by Republicans. Joining me now is Congresswoman Veronica Escobar of Texas and Leon Spears, law enforcement firearms instructor. Thank you both for being here. And Congresswoman Escobar, I note your passion as you spoke today. But I think you and I can both agree that gun reform ain't going to pass. It can't get through this particular House of Representatives. And because of the filibuster, it can't get through the Senate. That has to be incredibly frustrating for you as a lawmaker.
Well, Joy, thank you so much for having me on your program. Here's the thing. It can pass if the political will were there. If we could get a handful of moderate Republicans in the House to agree with us, and if some common sense senators, Republican senators in the Senate would choose to do it. But it's not that we cannot or that we are unable to. It's that Republicans have made a political decision that they value guns more than they value human life. They value the assault style weapon more than they value the little children throughout the country who live in fear, pain, and trauma. It is incredibly frustrating. You know, when we had the majority, the House majority, the last two Congresses, House Democrats took action, and we brought to the floor, we worked through committee, brought to the floor, and passed out of the House common sense gun violence prevention legislation that polls well across America, even with gun owners. But you're absolutely right. Because of the filibuster in the Senate, and because the Senate is unable to act on a crisis because of that filibuster, we didn't have enough Republican support. We heard Texas Senator John Cornyn say that basically the Senate has gone as far as it can go. The Senate has chosen to go as far as it can go.
You know, Leon, and this is one of those strange issues where there isn't really partisan disagreement. You know, Republicans, majority say, yeah, we should have some gun reform. Gun owners say it. The majority of gun owners. I mean, this is an overwhelming issue at this point that even gun owners say 97% support universal background checks. I'm talking about gun owners. 92% say raise the minimum age to 21. Red flag laws, 90% among gun owners. And you and I both know I'm a gun owner. I represent the majority of people who say, I don't want people who are unstable, people who are dangerous, people who want to hurt people to have firearms. You're a firearms instructor. You don't either. So why is this a political sort of worship? The worship of this particular firearm, the AR-15, by one side is holding us back. What is up with that?
A lot of times it's the history of giving government control. So you start with one and then it's a slippery slope. And so then there's a big government gun grab and their mentality of, okay, if I let them have this firearm, then I'm going to let them have another firearm. So that's the danger of allowing government to actually regulate to the extent of taking firearms or banning firearms. So that's the big issue with especially gun owners, lawful gun owners. People that have ill will always find a way to do damage and carnage to children. But I believe that you're right, that people desire to be, in a society that there are common sense gun restrictions. And so there's nothing wrong with slight, minute regulation that will be for the benefit of all.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is the Second Amendment, which the right has made they don't care about the First Amendment, by the way. They'll ban a drag show in a heartbeat. They don't care about that. But the Second Amendment, they're like, don't touch it. It literally says well regulated in it.
Yes.
And we lived for a decade or more with an assault weapons ban. It was very hard during that time. It wasn't impossible, but it was very hard to get an assault weapon. And the number of school massacres and school shootings and massacres went down. So we know that gun reform actually works. But the AR-15 in particular, let me just read you what the people who were related to the guy who invented the AR-15 said. Our father, this is the children of Eugene Stoner, said that he designed the AR-15 and subsequent M16 as a military weapon to give our soldiers an advantage over the AK-47. This is what the Stoner family told NBC in 2018. He died long before the mass shootings occurred, but we do think he would be horrified and sickened as anyone, if not more, by these events. You're a firearms trainer. Why would any civilian need an AR-15?
Well, a lot of times it's for sport. And the AR-15 is very, very accurate. And to that history, the AR-15 was actually designed in the early 1950s, okay? And it was designed by the manufacturer Armalite. So AR doesn't mean assault rifle or automatic rifle. It was actually a brand for Armalite. Then in 1959, it sold its design rights to Colt. And then 4 years later, Colt was awarded by the federal government to actually design the M16. And the M16 was designed for purposeful firearms for the Vietnam War.
But what was it for? What is the purpose of having that kind of a weapon in a war?
So the main two causes was it was being light and it was very useful.
To do what?
For soldiers to carry.
To do what, though? To kill a lot of people.
Well,
No, but I'm just being clear. When you go into a war, you're not going to go in with a handgun.
Yes.
You're going to go in with a gun that's designed to let you kill a lot of people from far away and protect yourself. That is the purpose of an AR-15. Whatever the AR stands for, it's a military assault rifle.
It is Thursday, the 30th of March of 2023. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya. A little bit of spice in your life. Just a little. Okay. How are you this morning? We are still getting into the swing of things here at the home front. And was up a bit late last night with my mom. Not that there was anything, drastic, but she just needed a little bit of cleaning up, remaking of the bed, and things like that. So we did that. I didn't have to throw her in the shower, fortunately, but it was close, very close. So she's resting peacefully as we speak at the moment here, and that's a good thing. So, Well, I guess we don't really have any appointments today, though we are going to have her hair done tomorrow, so that'll be somewhat of a test to see if she can, be out in the wild, albeit, with some very attentive ladies at the beauty parlor that she goes to. And she really likes them, and they like her, so I guess we'll be okay. And they're well experienced in caring for the hair of the elderly, so that's how that is. And she wants to get out, and that's part of getting her back into the swing of things, and that is what we are doing here. But existing on not very much sleep, and do I drink more than my usual allotment of coffee in a day? Which is, I got to tell you, in the morning when we're doing this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Okay, you only have a couple of cups, but they're really big cups, and that's how that is. I guess you have the same experience where you are too. Alrighty, so I saw just sometimes things just catch your eye, and you have to move on, but that sticks with you. And something that's sticking with me right now is that apparently Rona McDonald has charged the RNC over $100,000 for makeup application and her hair. Speaking of the beauty parlor, boy, I'm glad I don't spend that much on my mom. Yee. I love mom, but that's a lot. I don't know. Yeah, I got to tell you, $100,000's a little bit more than I have on hand. Well, we won't get into the privacy of finances, but I'm just saying, who does? Well, there might be somebody like Rona McDonald who comes from, the Romney clan. But she can't say Romney in front of Trump, and so she had to drop it. I thought family was everything. She's embarrassed by her family. I don't know. Maybe driving around with that dog on top of the station wagon when they were kids had a lasting impression upon her after all. Maybe. But $100,000 for makeup and hair. And some people might think that's a lot. But I don't know. Have you seen her? They've dolled her up pretty good. I'm not being sarcastic or anything, but they kind of dolled her up. To be a Republican, now you have to get dolled up. Jeez, look what they did to Stefanik. And a few others, too. Even that Huckabee lady that's the governor now. They tried to doll her up. You can only go so far. Boy, I don't know. We live in hateful times, don't we? And it's hard to tampen the dislike that I have for a certain segment of our population. Mm-hmm. I know we're not supposed to blame the voters, but why not? Because in spite of what Laura Burbert has to say about our form of government, we are a representative democracy. All right? She says we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic. And she only says that because she's a high school dropout. What does she know? What she knows is what somebody else has told her, and she has no idea about how we became a representative democracy. And in fact, our form of government is defined as such so that you can get citizenship when you take your test on the Constitution, damn it. Lauren Boebert could not even be a citizen of the United States if she came from anywhere else except Colorado. In any of the other states of the United States. Okay? Just saying. I always thought that it would be, maybe important that when kids got out of high school, they had to take maybe a civics constitution test, and if they couldn't pass, no citizenship for you. Now get to work. Put them to work doing anything that we want to their abilities and exploit them to all hell. And then blame them for all the ills of society that we've caused because we don't know how to treat people like equals. And then I thought, well, that's rather undemocratic, isn't it? And it is. And that's how the Nazis get to take over because of our goodwill. And at some point, we got to have some tough love. All right? Got to punch the Nazis. And we have a little story about how you can punch the Nazis in Florida. Yeah. All right. I'm just going to say that I worked at Disneyland, and I see how they worked from the inside out. Okay? I mentioned yesterday on social media that DeSantis is finding out What happens when you ignore the history of the Disney legal team? That's all I'm going to say about that here, because we got more to say as we get into the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy today. Okay, so what else? What else is going on in the world? Oh, let me look. Let's see. Okay, we got the hair and makeup cost the GOP donors nearly $100,000. That's always. Oh, yeah. This is kind of sad. There's going to be partial lung and colon surgery that the Pope's going to have to go under. Wow, they're going to do that at the same time. Eek! Because I got to tell you, lungs and colon are coming and going, as they say back on the farm. Is there any wonder why many of us wanted to escape the farm? It's like, you don't respect rural folks. I know. I used to live there. I mean, come on. How much insidious bigotry can one stand before you realize, I got to get out of this place? And I did. Not that type of bigotry existed, on our farm, but you have neighbors. And boy, can they tell you about what it is to be a bigot. Mm-hmm. Now, we've always had a sense of entitlement. I wonder why. Because we can move among those groups with impunity, criticize them, sometimes to their face, and get away with it. Many can't. And that's kind of where we are now, because they, with a capital T, have become very emboldened, taking over university school boards on the state level. Yeah, apparently Tennessee has just done this. I believe that's what I just saw. Let's see. Do I still have it up? Oh, no, it refreshed here on the Twitter machine, which I guess we're going to be losing to change the subject drastically. Elon Musk has pretty much destroyed that platform, because it was a pretty good platform for people to rally around or with. And I guess those on high have decided that we hoi polloi can no longer talk to each other and organize. How dare we? How dare we lift our heads above the mud and the muck? Keep looking at the ground. I worked for a guy, a company, construction company, where in the morning when I was a kid, I used to just marvel at the way sunlight would collapse. I used to call it light collapsing through the leaves and all that, and how it glistened and reflected. And I just loved the mornings. And it was before we were on the clock, too. And this is what kind of bothered me. But he yelled at me. What are you doing? I'm just looking at the sun glistening off the leaves of the trees. And boy, did that set him off. Now, I should mention I had hair, past my shoulders. I was a strapping fellow. Could pack a lot of stuff up a ladder onto a roof, mix a lot of concrete and float it out. I was, I'm just saying, I was strapping. Long hair hippie kid, but I played football. So there. But anyway, boy, did he get mad. And he demanded that if he was ever around, if he ever caught me looking up in the sky again, I was going to get fired. And I thought, well, I don't know. I'll work for a while and then I'll quit. Well, who knows? It just astounded me that someone would impose, I don't know, that authoritarian bullshit on someone. Even before they're even on the clock. It's one thing to say, like stop looking up in the sky. You're going to trip over something, and then I'm going to be liable for your injuries, or it's going to stop our production, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when I'm not on the clock, it's not like I was walking around dangerously either. All I was doing was watching the light collapse through the leaves of the trees. And that was a little bit too much experience for some people. And I guess maybe that's why we got to keep young people from voting. Because they actually are marveling at the beauty of our world. And those of us who have lived it know that it's full of grime and dirt and corruption, and how dare those young people be astounded by beauty. Yeah, well, I'm not living like that. I will confess that I didn't put it in the guy's face and walk around marveling at the collapsing light through the leaves of the trees in his face. I didn't do that. But I didn't stop doing it either. Just saying. All right. Well, I guess that was somewhat of a tangent. And tangents there are. So why don't we tangentially get back to what we have in store for you? Because we do take the time to curate a show the night before we do our show today. So why don't we get into it? Yes, as Joy said, Republicans like to say the AR-15 is not a weapon of war, but it absolutely is. And why do we know that? Because even the Uvalde cops said, we're not running in there. That guy has a battle rifle. So when some gun nut says, oh, you're not calling that weapon the correct name, you just say, it's a effing battle rifle. Shut the F up. Battle rifle. Okay. Guess what? On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, as we begin on this fabulous Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays, a permit to buy a handgun is no longer required in North Carolina. You know, it's the chaos. Then when the chaos actually comes, they can come in as the white knight and save everybody. And I'm putting the emphasis upon white. Speaking of which, the rejection of a veteran black educator for state superintendent has angered some Mississippi senators, who just happen to be of the Democratic Party, by the way. And Walt Disney World passed restrictive covenants that strips the power of the DeSantis-appointed Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. You ignore the history of the mouse at your own peril. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Credit Suisse violated a plea agreement with the United States by failing to report secret offshore accounts of wealthy, tax-avoiding Americans. And Taiwan's president is beginning a swing through the United States and Central America to shore up support. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across from that chat room link to the left and down a skosh is the link to our Patreon page. And please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. It really does help us pay our bills and all the other costs incurred running this powerhouse of resistance, as we have been doing for over a dozen years now. Darn, a dozen. Yes, and we have you to thank for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended, and that's no joke. So thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, do so at Netroots Radio on each of those platforms. Tom takes care of those, and thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. I incidentally post the show notes and links diary 10 minutes before showtime on Daily Co's, so I try to get those linked up. I certainly do for the podcast, but the show notes and links diary is where you can actually find not only all the links to the stories that we are featuring for each day, but a bit more of entertainment value. I guess, at least it's somewhat visual. So go and check out the show notes and links, because that's really where the real reportage is. Anyway, you can also follow the show on Twitter, such as it is, as I like to say, at Cookbook West. And most importantly, as I foreshadowed earlier, you can pick up podcasts. Please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, we burned up a lot of time. I'm going to turn into a Mike Malloy. Wouldn't that be nice? Anyway, we've been burning up a lot of time, so why don't we get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it is an article by Hannah Schoenbaum from the Associated Press. North Carolina residents can now buy a handgun without getting a permit from a local sheriff after the Republican-controlled legislature overrode the Democratic governor's veto, a first since 2018. The House voted 71-46 to enact the bill, which eliminates the long-standing permit system requiring sheriffs to perform character evaluations and criminal history checks of pistol applicants. The Senate overrode Governor Roy Cooper's veto in a party-line vote on Tuesday. The permit repeal takes effect immediately. Cooper and Democratic lawmakers warned it allows a greater number of dangerous people to obtain weapons through private sales, which do not require a background check and limits law enforcement's ability to prevent them from committing violent crimes. Those who purchase pistols from a gun store or a federally licensed dealer are still subject to a national background check, and concealed weapons permits are still required. Bill supporters say the sheriff's screening process for handguns was no longer necessary in light of significant updates to the national background check system. They also argue the permit system wasn't very effective at preventing criminals from obtaining guns, and I wonder why that is. The North Carolina Sheriff's Association supports the repeal in light of national system updates, but its current president does not. Although Republican seat gains in the midterm elections gave them veto-proof margins in the Senate, they were one seat shy of a similar majority in the House. Yesterday's House vote tally showed 3 Democrats, Representatives Tricia Cotham of Mecklenburg County, Cecil Brockman of Guilford County, and Michael Ray of Northampton County, failed to vote on the override, creating enough of a margin to meet the constitutional requirement. Republicans needed at least one Democratic member to join them, or as few as 2 Democrats not to vote. Well, Brockman was in urgent care on Wednesday morning, according to a statement released by his office. Gotham said in a statement she was receiving scheduled hospital treatment and had informed both parties that she would be absent. She said she does not support the permit repeal. A message left at Ray's legislative office was not immediately returned yesterday, Wednesday. Republicans gave Ray and Cotham key committee chairmanships this year, a rarity for the majority party in power. Pettis of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Mississippi's Republican-led Senate voted yesterday, Wednesday, against confirming veteran educator Robert P. Taylor as state superintendent of education, angering some black Democrats who said the rejection was at least partly because Taylor is black and wrote years ago about the state's racist history. The State Board of Education, which has members chosen by the Republican governor, lieutenant governor, and House Speaker, conducted a nationwide search for a superintendent last year. Board members announced in November that their unanimous choice was Taylor, who had worked the past 30 years in North Carolina. This whole confirmation was a political process, and I knew that coming in, Taylor told the AP yesterday evening after the Senate vote. He said senators in the past have confirmed all previous nominees for state superintendent, and he is disappointed this group of senators did not confirm him. The fact that they didn't, that is what I have to live with, Taylor said. I will always respect the process. It's not unusual for nominees to serve while waiting for senators to consider confirmation, and Taylor had been working as superintendent in Mississippi since January. With the Senate's rejection, the board will search for another superintendent. About 38% of Mississippi residents are black. Taylor would have been Mississippi's second black superintendent of education, after Henry Johnson served from 2002 to 2005. Anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Board members picked by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to oversee the governance of Walt Disney World said yesterday that their Disney-controlled predecessors pulled a fast one on them by passing restrictive covenants that stripped the new board of many of its powers. The current supervisors of the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District said at a meeting that their predecessors last month signed a development agreement with the company that gave Disney maximum developmental power over the theme park resort's 27,000 acres in Central Florida. The 5 supervisors were appointed by DeSantis to the board after the Florida legislature overhauled Disney's government in retaliation for the entertainment giant publicly opposing so-called Don't Say Gay legislation that bars instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity, as well as lessons deemed not age-appropriate. In taking on Disney, DeSantis furthered his reputation as a culture warrior, willing to battle perceived political enemies and wield the power of state government to accomplish political goals, a strategy that is expected to continue ahead of his potential White House run. Well, this is a hagiography, isn't it? The new supervisors replaced a board that has been controlled by Disney during the previous 55 years that the government operated as the Reedy Creek Improvement District. The new board members held their first meeting earlier this month and said they found out about the agreement after their appointments. We're going to have to deal with it and correct it, board member Brian Angst said. It's a subversion of the will of the voters and the legislature and the governor. It's completely circumvents the authority of this board to govern. Boy, you hate to see it, don't you? Under the terms of the agreement, the district is prohibited from using the name Disney or any symbols associated with the theme park resort without the company's permission, nor can it use the likeness of Mickey Mouse, other Disney characters, or other intellectual property in any manner. The company can sue for damages for any violations, and the agreement is in effect until perpetuity, according to the declaration. If the agreement is deemed to violate rules against perpetuity, it will be in effect until 21 years after the death of the last survivor of the descendants of England's King Charles III. Wow, I like that. In a statement, Disney said all agreements were above board and took place in public. As the statement read, all agreements signed between Disney and the district were appropriate and were discussed and approved in open, noticed public forums in compliance with Florida's government in the Sunshine Law. Separately, Disney World Service workers voted to accept a union contract offer that raises the starting minimum wage to $18 an hour by the end of the year. The agreement covers about 45,000 service workers at the Disney theme park, including costume performers who perform as Mickey Mouse and other Disney characters, bus drivers, culinary workers, lifeguards, theatrical workers, and hotel housekeepers. I don't think they're actors playing all of those, but workers will see their hourly wages rise from $5.50 and $8.60 an hour by the end of the 5-year contract, according to union leaders. A contract approved 5 years ago made Disney the first major employer in Central Florida to agree to a minimum hourly wage of $15, setting the trend for other workers in the region dominated by hospitality jobs. No wonder DeSantis wanted to take over Disney. But he can't, can he? And that is how you punch a Nazi. And I'm not kidding. All right, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Arthritis is common among veterans. Traumatic and overuse injuries during active duty are risk factors for developing arthritis. Fortunately, there are low-cost or no-cost strategies that can help veterans manage arthritis. Physical activity can reduce pain and improve function. It can also help improve mood and play a role in managing other chronic conditions, such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. You can do low-impact activities, such as walking, biking, swimming, and water aerobics, all good forms of exercise. Arthritis-specific classes can help you get started. Information on classes, exercise programs, and tools are available at cdc.gov/arthritis. These resources can help reduce pain and improve function. Learning self-management techniques can help all veterans become more active, improve their overall quality of life, and thrive.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Good eating habits developed in childhood can last a lifetime, but getting children to eat their fruits and vegetables is a common problem. Eating them adds important nutrients, helps control weight, and reduces the risks for many serious illnesses. Children in the U.S. are eating more fruit. However, 60% of children get fewer fruits than recommended, and 93% don't get enough vegetables. Childcare, schools, and school districts can help change this by meeting or exceeding federal nutrition standards for meals and snacks, including fruits and vegetables wherever food is offered, and helping children learn about and taste fruits and vegetables. At home, parents can eat a variety of fruits and vegetables with their children, and provide them as snacks, even if it takes many tries. Also, parents can include their children when shopping for, growing, and preparing fruits and vegetables. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute? When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you. You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
In a mental health emergency, why are only the police called and not mental health professionals? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Recently, when 31-year-old Najee Seabrooks of Paterson, New Jersey, locked himself in a bathroom and was threatening to harm himself, claiming he had 3 knives and a gun, the police were called. As reported in the New York Times, during the hours-long ordeal that followed, with Seabrooks in a bathroom and the police outside the door, Seabrooks was texting members of a harm reduction collective that he had been working for. He asked for their help, saying, "I need to hear your voices. I need to see your faces." And Seabrooks' colleagues came to the apartment building and showed the messages to the police, but the police wouldn't let them participate. Rather, a police unit came with high-powered firearms and helmets. Seabrooks peeked out and saw them. Afterwards, the project director said, "Showing a gun to a person going through a mental health crisis like this only increases paranoia and fear." When Seabrooks exited the bathroom and lunged at the police with a knife, they said, "They shot him, and he died." The state attorney general's office is investigating. Hopefully, the investigation can address the question why in Paterson, like many cities and towns across the country, only armed police and not mental health professionals are called to respond to mental health emergencies. How does that make any sense? The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1930. That was the day that ground was broken on what would become one of the worst workplace disasters in U.S. history. At least 476 and possibly more than 700 men died from a disease called silicosis. The project was called the Hawk's Nest Tunnel. It was part of a hydroelectric project by the company Union Carbide. The aim was to harness the energy of the New River in West Virginia to power a metals plant. Workers cut through 3 miles of solid rock under the Gauley Mountain to divert water for the project. Most of the workers were black men recruited from the South. Much of the rock they were cutting through had a very high silica content. Despite the fact that the dangers of silica dust were well known, the company ignored standard safety practices. It is safer to drill through high silica content using a wet drill method, which cuts down on the dust. The project manager opted to use dry drilling to save time on the project. They also failed to provide the needed ventilation or respirators for the workers. Men desperate for work during the Great Depression flocked to the project. In all, nearly 5,000 men labored on the tunnel. A congressional subcommittee that investigated the disaster found that the whole driving of the tunnel was begun, continued, and completed with grave and inhumane disregard of all consideration for the health, lives, and future of the employees. For many, work on the Hawks Tunnel was a death sentence. People with silicosis die a slow, agonizing, suffocating death. The companies involved in the project faced litigation, but in the end, they only paid out $200,000 in damages. Some that were impacted received as little as $30 for their lives.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 34 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the low to mid-50s, they say, currently under foggy conditions and a winter storm watch. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour and mostly overcast throughout the day. Partly cloudy tonight with increasing clouds overnight. Lows in the mid-50s. Winds out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then cloudy skies in the morning tomorrow with highs in the upper 40s, low 50s. Winds out of the southeast will then be shifting to the west-southwest or out of the west-southwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour, blustering in more rain later on in the day, and then we have snow in the forecast in a couple of days as well. Looks like we might get a little bit of rain today, as I just got a notice just popped up here in the Rogue River Valley region, so we'll look forward to that. Oh, yes. For some reason, pollen is still rated as none. Presumably, as the flowers start blooming, they might start registering, but there's something in the air. The air quality index for the region is good at 21 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is moderate, and it has ticked down to level 4. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.97 inches. Visibility is a quarter mile. And relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 60 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 61 degrees with rain. Rome is 65 and sunny. Kyiv is 44 and fair. Kabul is 46 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 57 and fair. Sydney, Australia is 61 and clear. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and fair. And New York, New York is 38 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Jamie Keaton and Courtney Bonnell of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Credit Suisse violated a plea agreement with U.S. authorities by failing to report secret offshore accounts that wealthy Americans use to avoid paying taxes, U.S. lawmakers said yesterday, releasing a 2-year investigation that detailed the role employees at the embattled Swiss bank had in aiding tax evasion by clients. The U.S. Senate Finance Committee pointed to an ongoing, possibly criminal conspiracy tied to nearly $100 million in accounts belonging to a family of American taxpayers that the bank did not disclose. It also said Credit Suisse helped a U.S. businessman hide more than $220 million in offshore accounts from the IRS. Credit Suisse revealed that it had found 23 accounts, each worth more than $20 million, that were not declared to tax authorities, many of them unveiled just days before the report was released, according to the committee. It said its findings show that more than $700 million was concealed in violation of the bank's 9-year-old plea deal with the Justice Department. The Swiss government pressed for a $3.25 billion takeover of long-troubled Credit Suisse by rival bank UBS this month amid turmoil in the global financial system. The collapse of 2 U.S. banks ignited wider fears that sent shares of Switzerland's second-largest bank tumbling as customers withdrew their money. The Senate findings pose problems for UBS as it tries to absorb Credit Suisse and create a single Swiss megabank, coming the same day that UBS named a new CEO to help push through the takeover. It's also Credit Suisse's latest run-in with U.S. authorities, following settlements worth hundreds of millions of dollars over mortgage-backed securities that were behind the 2008 financial crisis.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Alan Nickmeyer and Lisa Mascaro of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Taiwan's president addressed members of New York's Taiwanese community in a U.S. stopover on her way to Central America, seeking to rally allies of the self-ruled island in the U.S. and elsewhere as tensions rise with China. Pro-China demonstrators waving the Chinese flag were out on the streets for President Tsai Ing-wen's first hours in New York yesterday, Wednesday. Tsai Ing-wen, big traitor of China, the slogan on a sign held by one protester declared. In a speech last night to fellow Taiwanese in New York, Tsai thanked the United States for its security assistance and urged Taiwanese unity. The safer Taiwan is, the safer the world will be, she said. She pledged Taiwan would work with its democratic partners to remain on the path of democracy. Tsai arrived in New York on Wednesday yesterday and was expected to spend today in closed events in the city. While Taiwan is carefully calibrating Tsai's stops in the United States and foregoing official meetings with U.S. senior leaders in Washington in an effort to limit the scale of China's response. China is focusing on an expected meeting next week between Tsai and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. It would be one of the highest level in-person sessions for a Taiwanese leader on what the government calls transits through the United States. Officials did not make public advance details of her schedule for her stops in the United States, underscoring the sensitivity of her travel here. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.